And we're back. Coalition Burble. Hey,
Yeah,
you're
good to
looking a
see
little
you.
out of focus on this end.
Am I?
I think it's just maybe your Wi-Fi, and probably it's the rain. You got rain coming down in your house.
Oh yeah, all over the place.
That
Yeah.
must be it. It must be just the rain falling in front of your face.
Well, here's
It'll be
here's
fine It'll be fine. Nobody
yeah.
else will notice that except me, because once we put all this together, it takes, the actual video on your computer. So you'll be fine. Anyways,
should
what's
be.
going on? Enough of that kind of crazy talk.
Well, I just wanted to throw this out there because I thought it was funny. So last week, I think I mentioned that I did the podcast using my phone because my computer had decided to die. So I've
Yep.
got the computer working, but for some reason now my computer permanently thinks that it's in Las Vegas. So I'm not quite sure what that's all about. So again, interesting computer programs on my end. So like if I do a search, like how do I get to Home Depot? And it's like, well, it's like 400 miles from where you are. So it's like these directions are going on the interstate. So
That's
that's
weird.
Cool. Yeah.
Huh.
I just had to throw that out there for, continuing annoyances that, we all have to put up with from time to time.
Exactly. Well, maybe I don't know how you ended up fixing your computer, but clearly some foreign government has gotten into it and is just messing with you at this point.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I guess that's just how it rolls.
Anyways, it's been another crazy week.
For sure.
I continue to be very thankful that, not that I have any kind of a vast fortune or whatsoever, but I took pretty much all of our money out of the stock market a couple weeks ago. It's just like, and I usually don't do that. I'm just like, I just forget about it and leave it. But it was like, man, I was just getting this bad feeling about 3 weeks ago. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to kind of hold for a while.
Yeah. No, I mean, my view on the stock market has always been sort of the, just hang on through the rough spots.
Yeah.
So long as you can survive the rough patches, then, you're okay. And I don't have vast sums of money invested in stocks either. So, I mean, I lose a little or gain a little, but over time,
for sure. Just leave it alone.
Yeah.
Just leave it alone for sure.
Yeah.
No, I'm actually I'm just hoping to buy back in now that it's gone down a little bit. But
well, I mean, if you can call it the right way.
Oh yeah. Well, we know how that goes. Yeah. Usually it does.
If you got the direct line to Nancy Pelosi, then you're all set.
There you go. or Elon Musk. So anyways, but what I think what is fascinating about that piece of it, with all the craziness going on, is really the fact that the stock market's going kind of cratering right now. For the vast majority of people, it's like,
yeah,
because most people don't have stock, don't have very much stock in it. I mean, obviously some people have built over in the past few years more in the way of 401ks and things like that. But even still, you add all that in there, it's still a fairly low percentage of people that have any money in the stock market.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about the stock market is like, a lot of time when it goes down, it rebounds fairly quickly. It's not like it crashes and then takes decades to recover. I mean, it did, during the Great Depression, but generally speaking, it goes down, and 2 or 3 weeks from now, it'll be back to above what it was. And so the only people that really get killed by that kind of thing are people that find themselves in a position where, for some reason, they have to have money out of the stock market right then at that time. They can't put it off for 2 or 3 weeks. And I mean, it does happen to some people, but when you consider the percentage of the population that actually has stocks in the stock exchange, and then the percentage of those people that actually find themselves in a position where they have to, in some sort of emergency sense, withdraw down a lot of money out of their exchanges. I mean, in the long run, you can just kind of leave it alone, and you'll make a little something.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. So, but anyways, but kind of building off of that, it has been really interesting to kind of come back to the local level and all that kind of stuff. How much um, concern and people being fraught about what's happening at the local level because so many programs are being cut, and people are in the federal government are losing their jobs. And again, it's like I think we've talked about this. It's like I think everybody fundamentally believes there's probably things that we could cut. It's
Hmm.
just the way they're going about it, and it continues to be that way. And you couple that with the tariffs, it's just like I just keep shaking my head. I'm just trying to figure out what the end game is on all this.
Well, first of all, I do think you have to have at least some sort of an idea that it's kind of a long game. I mean, the Trump administration has only been the Trump administration for what, a couple of months.
Yeah, 2 months.
So
Yeah,
at this point, there's not really much you can say as far as what it's all going to look like in the end. Uh, I always say that for any president, the new administration that comes in, it's always a year. You have to wait about a year and then look back at that year and say, okay, did things kind of work or did they kind of not work? But
yeah,
like, you're never going to know anything in a few weeks.
no,
But it's interesting that you bring up the people losing their jobs and some of the effects that these things are having. I heard a term which I think is interesting, which is malicious compliance. And so it's the idea that, let's say you run a department in the government, whatever, and you're told, okay, you have to cut your budget by 30%. Well, you could, go through the books and cut out all the garbage and waste and, unnecessary funding for things that you're buying, or you could just fire half of your staff. And
right.
one way, you're complying in a way that's actually helpful and is generally good for everybody. And then the other way, you're intentionally making things as bad as possible, for everyone, because you have some political axe to grind with the person who told you needed to cut 30% of your budget.
Yep,
So I wonder how much of that is still going on. Obviously, there's plenty of people in these departments that are getting, cut away that would love to give Trump a black eye. And so I've heard about things like that, where maybe even more jobs are being lost than need to be, which would be unfortunate. But again, until you see how things all shake out over the course of sort of a longer period of time, I mean, it's really hard to know.
yeah, yeah. No, that's true. And at the same time, because I think what we do know is they're doing things like the one that bothers me the most is the kind of probationary people, because the way
Mhm.
apparently some of these work is, hey, if you've been kind of promoted in a lot of these jobs, you're automatically put on probationary status, even though you've been promoted because you've been doing a good job. Well, a lot of those people got axed, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the first thing they went for is the probationary people. And it's like that's the kind of stuff that's just like I just don't understand what the premise is of that, right?
Yeah.
But
Well,
like we'll see.
I've heard stories that are not exactly the same, but I've over the years, especially when it comes to teachers. So, once you're a
Hmm.
teacher and you start to have seniority, then you have, preference over new hires. So you could be a teacher that has a
Yeah,
history of doing a rotten job, but because you have seniority, they still end up firing the new person that maybe has been doing better. And so all these kind of things, I don't like them much. And it all goes back to something I think we've said on earlier episodes, which is, the decision that the Trump administration seems to be making right now is to go fast. And an easy way to
yeah,
go fast is just say, well, we've got all these probationary employees. They don't really have, the formal contracting in the way that other employees do, so we can get rid of them more easily. So instead of looking at quality or, who's got a good idea or who could really help you, you just do the easy thing and axe all of them. Which, and as I say, I
yeah,
agree that that's unfortunate. But again, at the same time, I do also see the sort of the urgency, because I mean, think about it. We're already talking about, we're worried about the economy or the stock market, what's happening, and I mean, it's only been 2 months. So I mean, the longer things drag on before the Trump administration gets to whatever point it wants to get to, it's just gonna
hmm,
it's just gonna be worse and worse. So I mean, again, I can kind of see both sides of it. I would love to see it done in sort of a more organized, thoughtful way.
yeah.
But I mean, I guess if you're going to do it, you're going to do it.
Yeah, well, it is, there's I, there's, I guess, a method to the madness in some
Well,
respects, and
you have to hope
and
that there is
it's
something.
yeah. Well, and but it was interesting because I think there was a sense that the economy, it's been riding high for a long time,
Hmm.
and so the timing's really interesting on this because I mean, at least in a lot of the local business people that I've been talking to the last week or two, they all have, and really nothing a whole lot to do with politics. Really, it was like there has been this sort of sense on the street, at least here in the metropolis of Vista, um, that
Yeah, the big city.
things are slowing down,
Yeah.
and so it's going to. And in fact, I was at the city council meeting the other night, and they, were coming out of their budget, and they're predicting that their sales tax revenues are going to be at best flat, and probably going down in the coming year, and their fiscal year starts in July. So
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting. But at the same time, having said that, it is not a huge surprise because really the economy's been on a tear for almost 10 years, which is a long time to be kind
Yeah.
of going up and up. I mean, coming out of the COVID and all that. I mean, it's just been kind of just burning like crazy. And so at some point there's going to be a correction, and so it's just interesting timing.
Yeah. Well, as I say, you just have to wait and see a little bit. I mean, there are natural ebbs and flows within the
Yeah.
economy all the time, and that's kind of like goes back to what I was saying about you got to give it a year because I mean, the economy does go up and go down. As I say, it does ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just sort of how it works. So you have to really start connecting, what's going on economically with actual policy, and that's sort of harder to do, and it takes a little bit more time. And brings me sort of to one thing that I was going to mention today is it's the whole idea that our Congress can't pass a budget. It's like
Well, that's
again,
nothing new.
right, but then that's the problem. The fact that we're kind of it's kind of like oh yeah, so the Congress is trying to pass another continuing resolution. Not only can it not pass a continuing resolution, it can't pass a budget. So it's like as far as like doing anything concrete that actually has an effect, you know, largely on the populace and the economy. I mean, there's got to be some kind of legislation. There's got to be some kind of budget at some point, but God only knows when that will happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've been operating without a budget for years, basically. I mean, this is just
It's awful.
they continue they continue to do the on both sides. Whoever's in charge, they continue to do that. And again, I know we're just beating the same drum, but all the more reason to have another few voices in there to try and bring people together. Because I think
Yep.
people, again, are so exhausted by this. It's like on again, off again. And you can say that regardless of the administration. I mean, there's definitely been it's like the student loan stuff
Yeah.
that Biden was trying to push through on again, off again, on again, off again. And it was just like, it's just not a good thing when the economy is not stable and it's not even the economy as much. It's just our ability to govern is not
Mhm.
stable. And
And
that's nothing new. That's been
yeah,
going on for quite a while.
but I think it becomes doubly problematic when you have a new administration, and then triply problematic when that new administration is seen as chaotic in the first place. So
Right.
with the Trump administration, nobody really exactly knows how it's all going to shake out, what exactly they're going to do, how it's all going to work. Just like you were saying at the beginning of the episode. And the thing is, that takes away from consumer confidence. I mean, it's like, why would you
Hmm.
be spending a lot of money right now when you have really no idea what's actually going to happen in the next 6 months?
Right.
So, I mean, I think because of that, you are going to see a downturn in the economy. You're going to see a downturn in the stock market as well, because a lot of it has to do with just uncertainty. Nobody really knows exactly what's happening. And like, I can give you another actual example from my life because I think it's kind of interesting. So the IRS decided to up and delay tax collection for anybody who's a tax filer in Los Angeles County. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but because
No.
My address is still, as far as my legal registration for where I'm registered to vote and stuff. So my address is
Right.
still in Los Angeles. I don't actually have to make a quarterly tax payment apparently until October because of the fires.
Oh, because of the fires?
Yeah. And so it's like, again, I'm not complaining actually because, it's kind of nice. I don't have to worry about making a payment until October.
Right.
But it sows uncertainty. It's like, okay, all the things that I was planning to do in a certain way, now I'm not going to do, but I'm going to have this uncertainty about, what's going to actually happen in October. How big of a payment am I going to have to make there when I have to make up all of my quarterlies? Or should I just do quarterlies anyway? And as they
Yeah.
say, it may not seem like a lot, but when you're trying to do like financial planning and consider, what can I
Huh.
invest? What can I buy? What can I spend money on right now? Any
Yeah.
kind of uncertainty at all, even if it's not necessarily like a big weight that like something
Yeah.
terrible is going to happen, it's still like, okay, what's going on exactly?
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. And I think of that we're kind of our own worst enemy, right? It's kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy when you
Mm,
start feeling that way in the economy. And it's like,
yeah.
I'll never forget back in the Great Recession, back in 2008 timeframe or so. I was working with a company at that point, a client of mine, and they were actually doing pretty well during the whole thing. And I was talking to the head guy there, and he said, "Yeah, we just decided not to participate in the recession." I mean, it was like this mindset that they just had
I
this mindset. It's like, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, and if we see little things here and there where we can, take a left instead of right, we're going to do it. But we're just not going to participate. And
yeah,
and they did really well. And it kind of comes back to it is sort of a mental thing in a way, that hey, if we're starting more and more of us are convinced that things are going to be a little rocky, well, they probably will be a little rocky.
yeah. Yeah, that Great Recession thing too, the real estate and the stock market. And again, I was at the time working as a physical therapist, and the recession didn't really affect me much at all.
Right,
I mean, everybody needs
right.
health care. That didn't change. And so, it kind of passed over me, and
Yeah,
it affected other people I know more. But I mean, when you look at that too, things did recover relatively quickly after the session. A few years down the road, and the
yeah,
economy had sort of rebounded. And again, to go back to what we were talking about earlier too, is that so much of I think the Great Recession was a self-inflicted wound by bad policy, bad budgeting,
mhm,
a bad regulatory environment, so many things that because our legislature is utterly contemptuously incompetent, that it led to another recession. And you see what's going on now,
yeah.
and there's always a thought in the back of my head, it's like, how bad are they going to screw it up, and what are we going to be facing after they do?
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's true at every level, right? I mean, we're kind of focused on the federal, but I mean, the state of California is like scrambling, trying to figure out
Yeah,
how they're going to dig out of the billions in deficit they're in. San Diego, the city of San Diego, is just a disaster right now for all kinds of reasons, right?
yeah,
And so it happens. It seems to be happening at a lot of different levels, and knock on wood, at least from what I understand with the Vista stuff here locally, they are starting to focus on it, and they've always run surpluses and stuff, and have a rainy
yeah,
day fund and all that because they got burned back in the Great Recession, and I think they learned their lesson at least for now. Like, these tends to have short-term memories a lot of times, depending on who's involved. But at least for now, they have a good memory about because they had to lay off people and stuff like that, and they've become a lot more conservative in terms of how they manage the finances. and
Yeah.
which is a good thing because we all have to do that. It's like
Yeah.
that's what just mind-boggling to me about the federal stuff. It's like, again, I think almost anybody could agree with something that large. You can easily trim 10% at any
Oh yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
so, how they can't come to an agreement to work together to figure out what makes the most sense to do that. I mean, literally in every department. I mean, every department, because there isn't really too many small departments at the federal level.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're just huge because you're dealing with 50 states. So I get why they're big,
Yeah.
but just anything that's big, there's bound to be places that you can economize. And I don't know why they never seem like they focus on this goal. It becomes this sort of political gotcha on whatever program one side doesn't like of the others, and they want to go attack that, right? And it's like, well, that's not really constructive for
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah. I think that sort of
Keeps everybody
brings out.
separated.
Yeah, it kind of brings out sort of like the most absolute basic argument for sort of like the conservative position in government, which is, the bigger and more complicated something gets, the
Mm-hmm.
more difficult it is to run and the more expertise that is required to run it. And when you consider the
Yep.
ineptitude of our legislature and many of our other politicians, it's like, do you want a hugely complex, hugely vast organization being run by a bunch of people who are nincompoops? And I think that that's just bad. And so
Right.
the idea behind
Yeah.
conservatives is you want to keep things simple. Do the basic things that really need to get done. Keep it small, keep it simple, keep it limited. And that way, the people that are there trying to run it have some capacity to understand what's going on and some capacity to actually, you know, run the system that's there. Because you always hear this about like these big complicated bills that get written for Congress. And it's the same way for California. So many things are hidden in this legislation that you don't
Oh
understand
yeah.
what the consequences are going to be. And people pass things without reading them or knowing what's in them or any effects that they're going to
Right.
have on them. Because you're trying to do
Right.
things that are just so big and so complicated that the people that are supposed to be doing them can't do them. And so it
Right.
invariably leads to problems. So again, that's like the most basic argument for why you want a conservative government.
Oh yeah. No. And I've always understood that, and it totally makes sense. And then the trick in all of it is then again kind of going back to the measurements of what we want to focus on as a country.
Hmm.
And because there is the balance, it's like government can be a good thing or it could be a bad thing, right? It's like
Yeah,
they can do some good things. It's like, hey, if we're trying to whatever protect the environment, or we're trying to grow technology so it's a positive thing. People either seem to love or hate NASA, right? Because it's
yeah.
like, do we really need to be going to Mars? I'm not so
Mhm.
sure. But a lot of the stuff that comes out of that development
Yeah, makes
actually
a big
ends up
difference.
being a very interesting. I mean, we wouldn't have things like GPS and stuff like that if it wasn't for some of those explorations, right? And
Velcro.
so Velcro, exactly, right? And and Tang. Uh,
Yeah, there you go.
so there's always that push and pull because but we've just kind of lost our way in terms of what are we trying to ultimately achieve as a country beyond the obvious things of we want to be safe, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. That's the number one. But beyond that, I mean, can we just figure out what's the way to get us to the highest level of enjoyment and happiness and freedom in life? And
yeah.
we can never boil it down to that kind of level. It's always, yeah, but if you do this, you got to do that. And it's like, wow.
Yeah, it's
So,
tough. As you say, it's a balancing act. I've always felt like, when it comes to the federal government, it should be basically a regulatory body and it shouldn't actually
right.
run anything because it doesn't do a good job at running things, which would mean, for instance, going back to the NASA example, it would mean that there would never have been a NASA. But, you would have had to rely on private organizations. And so you can make what you will of that argument. It's like I can see, again, it's one of those things where you can have a discussion about it and see both sides. I think a lot of great things came out of NASA, but then again, I'm not sure that the federal government was the right people to be running that show at that time. But then again, without the inspiration of JFK and the push to get to the moon and all those things, I mean, NASA never would have. We never would have achieved a lot of the technological
Oh,
advancements.
absolutely.
So, I mean, as I
Absolutely.
say, there's arguments that can be made in both directions, but God, the whole waste thing that we're dealing with now, and the fraud and all these non-governmental organizations, the NGO things that are getting funded and the way they're funded. And California does the same thing. It just
Oh,
takes
yeah.
a huge chunk of money and then throws it out to people, and then it's gone. It's the
Yeah.
24 billion for the homeless that just vanishes into the ether. So I mean,
Right.
there's got to be some ability to step up and say we can't keep doing those kind of things anymore. And as
Right.
I say, just can't keep it simple.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and back in the day when some of the big advances happened, it was relatively simple. I mean, in terms of the vision of it, right? So you have an interstate highway system,
Yeah,
or you build the Hoover Dam, right? Um, and so I think all those things have been monumental achievements and probably couldn't have been done in the private sector. I mean, you just don't have. There's not a big enough profit motive. And
right.
it was funny because I was talking to like some of the city leaders the other night about different things that are going on here, and it's always a challenge of what is the role, where the city can take. Number one, you got to represent everybody. So if
Right.
it's only a profit oriented goal, well, there's just going to be a lot of people who are left out of the equation, and it could be a vital service that needs to be provided, right?
Yeah.
And so it can't be all kind of profit motivated, and that's where we just kind of. But then you can go the other way, right? It's like, okay, well, do we really need to invest in that just so people can have a free time at whatever the program is or whatever? So
Yeah.
it's, I mean, I do actually respect in some regards, particularly local politicians that have to deal with it because they end up living right next door to their neighbors who are yelling at them and screaming at them all the time, compared to the federal guys who you don't really get to see them a whole lot.
Yeah.
So that's why the local stuff is so important.
Yeah. But I also think that's why, sort of like the push for globalization that, some people seem to think is a good idea. I think it's such a bad idea because the further away removed the government is from the actual problems that it's trying to address, the
Yep.
less it cares about them and the less it knows about them. So it's like you
Yep.
want as much government near you as you can get versus government that's affecting you far away. I mean,
Yep.
if the only government entity that I ever had to deal with was the city of Vista, then things would be much simpler because I would just have to deal with this one entity. But it's all these layers. I have to deal with the city of Vista, who has its specific problems. But then you've got to deal with this arcane legislature coming out of California that may or may
Yep.
not actually apply to you particularly, like California building codes. Oh my God!
Well, or
Like,
county. I mean, even you got a layer in between there. You got county stuff too.
yeah,
Yeah.
county. It's like they want this and and they don't. It's like that doesn't make any. None of this stuff makes any sense. None of the stuff that you're asking us to do makes any sense. And it's like,
Yeah.
but it's like layer after layer after layer of things that are slowing you down. So I mean, it really is just crazy. And then of course you get federal stuff, and that's
Yeah.
even further away. And can you imagine if we decided someday that we were going to be listening to like Brussels tell us what to do? I mean, what the hell would they be telling us? I mean, God only knows.
Yeah. No, it's crazy times, but I don't know. Like I said, I'm just kind of in a weird way, kind of sitting back watching it and see if it all kind of melts down. And sometimes that's a good thing. Melt down and rebuild it from the ground up because
Yep.
it's not working. It's not working
Yep.
right now. And the main thing when I talk to friends on either side of the spectrum of stuff, I think everybody kind of understands it's broken. Number one, And the only way out of it is for people to start talking about it and trying
Yeah.
to come to the middle. And, I think more and more people are through this process might do that. That's at least my goal in all of it.
Well, yeah,
So,
and I really hope that's the case because again, I've lived through Democrat regimes, Republican regimes. You know, when we've had Democrat presidents that control Congress and Republican presidents that have Republican Congresses and all these different iterations of these different combinations of things. And the fact that it seems like no matter who you have in what position controlling what branch of government, they still can't pass a budget. Something has got to give. I mean, at some point,
yeah,
people have just got to take a step back and say, I mean, this is like the most basic function of the legislature is to pass a budget. And if it simply
yeah,
isn't possible to do, if it cannot be done, and they're demonstrating that it can't be,
real,
and we've seen it year after year after
right.
year that it cannot be done, then something
Yeah,
absolutely has to change in the way that we go about things because it's crazy that our country doesn't have a budget.
right. Well, and again, that's where people need to step up and start talking to each other because uh, it. I think on both sides of the equation, they're focused on really trying to keep us separated.
Yeah.
I mean that it's just they want people to be divided because they're easier. It's the whole together we rise, divided we fall sort of thing,
Yeah.
and that again, that's not a unique characteristic of either the Republicans or Democrats. They both do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and they want us divided, and that's how they're. It's just a bizarre. I mean, I think the entire country needs to go in for counseling.
that I can agree with. But yeah, no, I think I'll join you in the wait and see approach because I guess after they pass this continuing resolution, then it's on to try and actually pass a budget. And if the Republicans can't do it, if under the circumstances in which they were elected, that they got the president that they wanted, they control the House for 2 years, and they have control of the Senate. If the Republicans cannot pass a budget under these circumstances, then I think we all have to admit that the Republicans cannot pass a budget. And then something has
Right?
to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I know. That's really kind of the number one objective that they have, and they keep failing on it over and
Right. If they
over
can't
again.
do it, then I mean, what are we voting for? Something's got
Yeah.
to change.
I mean, if you're working for a company, you'd be fired. If you were the budget planner and you
Absolutely.
couldn't come together with a budget, you'd be fired.
Yeah,
you
it'd
know.
be all over for you. Yeah,
All
it's
right,
crazy.
man. Well, stay dry,
Oh
and
yeah,
yeah,
they out of the mud
hopefully.
at this point.
Oh, exactly. It's crazy, but it's good. We need the rain, so I'm looking forward to it.
All right.
All right, we'll talk
Well,
to you next week.
yeah, great to see you. See you